Welcome back to Mind Matters, an invitation to well-being. Here we continue our conversation on dealing with the grief with the Dr. Shyam Bhat and Urmila Kandha. Urmila, when you did decide to seek out therapy, what was your family's response? Because you'd just been through a major life incident, you'd lost a family member. I'm sure they were all grieving or mourning in their own way. And then, when you said that you wanted to seek therapy, did you get the support that you needed?
This is something which I have taken a step by myself. I did not discuss with anybody else because it was a help that I need. I felt that consulting a therapist would make a difference to me. And so I went ahead and just took help that I needed.
Tell me a little bit about that. Was it easy to find the right sort of therapist that you needed in that particular moment? And also, what was your relationship with the therapy? How did that go for you?
So I think when I decided to seek help and I did consult a therapist, initial couple of sessions felt like as if it was more like just venting out. Uh, I would be candid enough to say that it wasn't easy to really convince yourself that you're really deriving some value from the conversation. Because we as professionals are trained to think that everything comes with a timeline. If I have given 1 hour to therapy, it should have a return on value. Return on value in terms of time, return on value in terms of emotional comfort. I looked at alternatives and hopped on to employee assistance programs to seek out alternate therapists. But yes, I did not give up. And I think that was important.
That is the important thing. Dr. Shyam, Urmila raised something which is very important. How does one inculcate the patients to go through the process? Because mental health, just like physical health, sometimes requires patience. So how does one make sure that they see it through?
Sohila, as Urmila was saying, I think many people expect therapy to yield immediate and direct results. And when they find out that therapy is not that kind of journey, in the sense that the therapist doesn't often or usually tell you solutions to do this or do that, but rather therapy is a process of gradually peeling back the layers within one's own mind, the way one is responding, the narratives in the mind about what has happened, understanding one's own journey. Because as we were talking about grief, and we did say that that everybody experiences grief in their own personal way. Why is that? It's because we are all fundamentally different in the ways we grew up, the ideas we have, and how we hold things dear, how we respond to loss. And so when a profound event like a loss happens and you're processing grief in therapy, it's not just about recovering from the grief, it's also about understanding one's own nature. So the amount of self-awareness and insight that can come about from the process is profound, and that will ultimately be transformative for the individual. But that takes time. In therapy, it does take time because it will take you time sometimes to find the right therapist in terms of match. It can take time to establish rapport and a therapeutic relationship with the therapist. And then because we're dealing often with subconscious material, not just conscious thoughts, that takes time to sort of get into. At the end of the day, whether you call someone's issue depression, anxiety, grief, stress, a relationship issue, it doesn't matter, because the voyage in therapy ultimately is the person discovering aspects of themselves that they did not understand, they did not know, they did not realize. And that helps people really become more resilient and unlocks their potential.
I think it sounds like we could all do with a little bit of therapy if that's what the end result could be, not just in the wake of a loss or grief or a traumatic life experience, which is when most people are likely to reach out. But Dr. Shyam, one thing which keeps coming out to me in our conversation is that when one decides to go seek therapy, this transformation can happen. What if there is someone suffering because of not being able to deal with their grief, or not being able to deal with loss, or a general life experience, and they're suffering because of a change in their temperament, just not being happy, but they're not ready to seek out that help? I think this is very important because, sometimes because of the stigma, sometimes because of inability to want to change, sometimes because of lack of time, sometimes because of financial constraints. People do not seek out the therapy they might necessarily need. What can we do in such a case?
This is an important question and a difficult situation, and one that's actually, unfortunately, all too common. Because that's still one of the biggest barriers, is just the sense that if I seek help for mental health, somehow that makes me, there's something wrong with me, as opposed to if I go to a doctor for a physical issue. When it comes to our mental health, we take it, we feel obviously more personally about it, and therefore many people resist seeking help, both because of social shame and stigma, but also I think a deeper shame about it. And so the first step is to create a society where there's widespread knowledge that, look, we are, as you correctly said, Sohila, it's not, therapy is not just about treatment. I actually do think, and of course I'm biased, but I do think that all human beings in the contemporary world can use a form of therapy. It doesn't have to be with a therapist per se, but a form of therapy which is a form of inner exploration, because of the fact that as human beings we have such a unique brain and mind that, unlike any other animal species, we live in past and future, and so we can project out what might happen, and in that sense we're never completely free of threat of loss. Even if we are not feeling loss right now, it could be projected out into the future. So therapy should be, in that sense, totally destigmatized, and in fact be as considered as important for one's health as like going to the gym, in my opinion. Now secondly, but when in an individual case, when someone is suffering and they're clearly suffering and the family member knows they're suffering but they're not getting the help, then it is a challenging situation. But here are some pointers. Firstly, for the family member to really form an even better relationship or a bond or an alliance with the person. The second thing is to really first start by reminding them why you love them and all the good qualities they have. Because the problem is, as soon as you say, let's get therapy, many people hear there's something wrong with me and I'm weak, or there's something deficient in me. So prefacing the conversation about therapy with first just a reminder of why you love the person, what do you love about the person, and all the great qualities that you see in the person. The next thing is to really communicate that, that you're concerned about them. To say the statement in a way that is clear that it's about your concern about them, not accusing them of any behavior or anything that sounds like blame or criticism, but just to say, listen, I'm concerned about you. I see that you've been not eating for many days, or that you look sad for many days. How are you feeling? Get to a place where you can suggest something like, what would you feel about talking to somebody about this? And you could also share, if someone has been through, you've been through therapy, or a friend has been through therapy, you can talk to your loved one about that and tell them what the therapeutic process is like, and to totally normalize that. And then of course to suggest to them that they can get help, and that you will support them in that journey of seeking help. And it's also important to remember that this is not going to happen usually in one conversation. It might need multiple conversations. It's important not to lose your patience, not to back off, and to continue to be there, to listen to them, and to ask them, maybe you have other ideas about what will help you. You can share that with me and have that discussion as well. So it needs a lot of engagement, a lot of persistence, patience, and love to try to help that person get the professional help they need. But it's really important, and it can make a big difference in somebody's life.
Right. I'm a big believer in therapy, but the first thing is just acknowledging that I need to speak. Urmila, coming back to you now, you said that eventually you did go to your employees' welfare assistance. How did that work out for you, and how are you coping now?
So I think, Sohila, as I said, healing is a continuous process. It's a journey, and I definitely feel much better than I was feeling last year. So it's important to acknowledge how we are feeling. It's important to leverage all possible channels that offer help, and these are highly confidential, so they don't really advertise your problems. Another thing which has consciously helped me was reflective journaling. I have been passionate about writing. I mean, writing gives me an immense soul cleansing experience.
So the takeaway from this conversation is grieving is as individual as our lives, so it's important to give people the time they need to grieve without judgment. This small difference can go a long way. Dr. Shyam and Urmila, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sohila.
Thank you, Sohila.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Mind Matters, an invitation to well-being. Before we go, we do want to say that the bravest form of strength is vulnerability. So it's okay to say you're not okay.